In 2005, a gang in Brazil pulled off a heist so impressive it made the FBI's list of top 10 largest cash robberies in history. The twist? The only part of the bank they set foot in was the vault itself. They did not, however, have access to futuristic teleportation technology. Imagine a secret tunnel winding under the city, a fake landscaping business as cover, and planning that would impress even Hollywood scriptwriters. These ordinary guys combined smarts, patience, and guts to pull off something extraordinary. The perfect cover, a landscaping business. Brazil, 2005. A new landscaping business opens in Fortaleza. A normal enough situation, hardly worth looking back at 20 years down the line. Well, this innocent-looking operation was actually a cover for one of the boldest heists ever. The gang picked this spot carefully. They set up shop just 75 meters from the Banco Central, creating a believable front with business cards and uniforms. But behind the scenes, they were up to something big. The property was the starting point for a secret tunnel leading straight to the bank's vault. Their cover was clever because it made sense. Landscaping involves digging and moving dirt, so no one thought twice about the noise or the trucks coming and going. People assumed they were hauling garden stuff, but really they were bringing in tunnel digging gear and carting away tons of dirt and stone from under the city. To keep up appearances, the gang chatted with locals and even did some actual landscaping work, which was nice of them. They became familiar faces in the neighborhood, blending in while they worked on their real plan right under everyone's noses. Over the months, their operation grew bigger and bigger. When the truth came out, everyone was both shocked and amazed, and understandably so. I mean, this story would be far-fetched if you saw it in a film. But this was real. Engineering a path to millions. 78 meters of new underground tunnel was dug underneath a city with not a single person batting an eyelash. The gang behind the Banco Central heist in Fortaleza, Brazil, pulled off something incredible. They burrowed right up to the vault in one of the country's most secure banks. The tunnel was as long as 2 Olympic swimming pools, weaving through the city's underground maze. One wrong move could have been catastrophic, hitting water pipes, sewer lines, or other obstacles that would have ruined everything, both by causing them to drown in yesterday's breakfast, and because that would ensure discovery. The gang didn't just use shovels and grit, obviously. They brought in experts in math, engineering, and digging. These weren't regular crooks, these were specialists who could plan and dig a tunnel that would impress even professional miners. Their tool list was impressive: special digging gear, air systems, lights, and fancy surveying equipment. All this to stay on track as they inched closer to their multi-million-dollar goal. One shovel of dirt at a time. They faced some tough problems, dealing with different soil types, managing groundwater, and keeping the tunnel from collapsing. It's amazing they made a stable tunnel that could figuratively support their heist plans and the literal city above. As they got close to the end, things got really tense. Being off by even a little could mean the difference between hitting the jackpot or comically hitting the security office. They had to be super accurate to come out right under the vault. When they were confident they found the right spot, they started cutting into the vault floor with extreme care. But this wasn't just cement, it was concrete. As they got deeper, they switched to the blowtorch, carefully melting through the steel inside the concrete. It was like a careful dance. They had to move fast enough to get in, but slow enough not to set off any alarms. One wrong move, and the vault's sensitive sensors would catch them. But what about all the other security stuff that must go on in banks? The gang had done their homework. They studied how the bank worked and found a weak spot in the security system, a place where the alarms didn't quite cover everything. This let them slip past all the high-tech security that would have normally caught them. When they finally broke through the last bit of concrete, there it was, the open vault, with all its treasures right in front of them. They had just broken into one of Brazil's toughest vaults without setting off a single alarm or cutting through a single door. Security experts would be scratching their heads over this one for years. The gang had dug their way to millions, making a tunnel for the history books. But though the hard part was now over, the challenge of moving 3.5 tons of cash through a narrow tunnel was nothing to scoff at. the $70 million payday. Imagine standing in a dimly lit vault, surrounded by stacks of unimaginable wealth as paper bills, the smell of the ink mixing with the stench of the earth they dug through to get there. This was what the gang experienced when they broke into the Banco Central vault in Fortaleza, Brazil, but the real challenge was just starting. The gang had to move 3.5 tons of cash through a narrow tunnel without getting caught or messing up and blocking the tunnel. 3.5 tons is as heavy as a large SUV, or half an African elephant, or 1/30,000th of an aircraft carrier, but in stacks of bills it was overwhelming, both physically and logistically. Time wasn't on their side. Every second increased their risk of being found out. They had to work fast and smart. They came prepared with a system, using bags and containers to organize the cash, probably sorting it by value, likely a rule of acquisition, so I understand completely. Picture a criminal assembly line, some filling bags, others sealing them, and the rest getting ready to move them. Imagine how tense it must have been, passing bag after bag through the dark, knowing each second they lingered could be the moment of discovery and the end of their genius plan. When they finished counting, the true size of the heist became clear. The gang had taken 5 containers of 50 real notes worth 164,755,150 reals, about $70 million in 2005. Adjusted for inflation, that's $112,710,351 today. This robbery was so big that, as mentioned before, it made the FBI's top 10 list of largest cash heists ever. But in the world of big-time crime, a huge score often leads to huge problems. As the gang vanished into the tunnel with their massive haul, they were about to learn that stealing money was the easy part. The real challenge was ahead, staying free, staying alive, and somehow spending their stolen cash without getting caught. One of the problems being that for this exact scenario, large cash expenditures on the record tends to get you on government lists of people to keep an eye on for money laundering. The perfect crime? Monday morning, August 8th, 2005, the sun rises over Fortaleza, Brazil, and bank employees arrive at Banco Central for what they think is just another day. Of course, the bank looks the same as it always has from the outside. But as they get to the vault, something feels off. Perhaps it was a change in humidity, or a failing light bulb, or it was the massive hole in the floor and the fact that the vault was empty. The staff are in shock. They've just walked into one of the biggest bank heists ever. Soon, the place is crawling with investigators. As they dig deeper, it's clear this wasn't your average robbery. These thieves were more like engineers, planning something that would make movie heists look like child's play. But how do you even start investigating when there's hardly a trace left behind, other than the hole in the floor? The investigators had their work cut out for them. They found the tunnel the thieves used, but that just led to more questions. How did no one notice someone digging a 78-meter tunnel under a populated city? Who had the skills to pull that off? Forensic teams went over everything with a metaphorical fine-tooth comb, but the criminals were smart. They'd used burnt lime to get rid of fingerprints, leaving the investigators with almost nothing to go on. The Brazilian Federal Police were racing against the clock. Those first 2 days after a crime are crucial, but time was slipping away fast. Everything was moving slower than they wanted, talking to witnesses, gathering evidence, following leads. But it wasn't all bad news. They had a few leads early on, with 8 potential suspects. There was another big problem, though. The stolen money didn't have serial numbers. Once it left the bank, it was practically impossible to track. It just disappeared into thin air, mixing in with all the other cash out there. As time went on, people started thinking about the heist like it was some kind of legend. It seemed too perfect. Had these thieves really managed to pull off the perfect crime? The aftermath, a web of intrigue and blood. What happens when criminals suddenly find themselves with more money than they know what to do with? The aftermath of the Banco Central heist shows us a dark answer. As the dust settled on the $70 million robbery, things took a twisted turn, and what seemed like the perfect crime became a nightmare for many involved. In the months after the heist, violence and kidnappings swept through Brazil's criminal underworld. From October 2005 to April 2006, at least 6 kidnappings were tied to the robbery. Victims' families had to pay huge ransoms. The stolen money, instead of bringing freedom, put targets on the backs of those involved. Luis Fernando Ribeiro's story is the most chilling. He was one of the alleged masterminds. Weeks after running to Sao Paulo, Ribeiro disappeared. His family paid a massive ransom, but it didn't save him. His body was found later, shot 7 times, with handcuff marks on his wrists. The money he risked everything for led to his death. It's ironic. The sudden flood of cash shook up criminal networks across Brazil, starting a brutal fight amongst the gangs. Those who got rich from the robbery became targets, hunted by other criminals who wanted a piece of the pie. Things got even messier when 3 police officers were arrested for being involved. This cast doubt on the whole police force, raising questions about how deep the corruption went and who could be trusted to solve the crime. As the violence grew, it changed how organized crime worked in Brazil. The stolen millions likely ended up with powerful criminal groups, hinting that this wasn't just a one-off job, but part of a bigger criminal operation. As the investigation went on, the true size of the crime became clear. What started as a clever heist quickly turned into a mess of violence, betrayal, and corruption. For many involved, the Banco Central robbery kicked off a dark and dangerous time in their lives. It showed that when it comes to organized crime, who wins depends on the one with the biggest stick with which to murder the rest. But the police aren't out of the story completely. In Sete Lagoas, a regular traffic stop turns into a big deal. 2 guys in a car-carrying truck are caught with over 2 million reals in stolen cash. This surprise find kicked off a series of arrests that slowly shortened the list of those involved still free. But the masterminds were still out there. The search for these top guys became international, with Brazilian police working with other countries. By the end of 2005, they'd only found about 20 million reals of the stolen 164,755,150. Most of it was still missing. The masterminds, the one who planned this amazing crime, seemed to have gotten away. Even with some success, most of the money has still not been recovered, but around 54 people have been arrested, so at least there's been some success. Experts think the money's now probably spread out in different places, either hidden or being laundered, likely never to be found. Conclusion. The challenges of securing against such elaborate schemes such as this are huge. Banks have to get creative, using a range of new measures. They've added reinforced concrete foundations to stop tunneling, seismic sensors to detect underground activity, and even ground-penetrating radar to monitor the earth beneath their vaults, which in this case would have stopped the heist before it surfaced. The Banco Central heist is still a warning for banks worldwide. It reminds us that getting too comfortable is dangerous. Today's banks are more watchful than ever, always checking and upgrading their security. But the Banco Central also thought they'd done all they could. Before this heist happened, they wouldn't even have considered this a possibility. Perhaps there's something else we've all overlooked, and that will become the next to enter the history books as one of the most daring heists in history.